Hello out there, and today we're taking a look at the Benchmade 486 Saiboo. And the Saiboo was a new release from Benchmade. It came out the same week as Blade Show, and it was one of those knives that the first time I saw it, I just knew I was gonna have to get it. I saw a picture of it and it called to me. And I don't know if it was just the fact that it has a very traditional and utilitarian kind of blade shape that we've seen in a number of different models before, or if it was just all of the extra details that you see in this this handle, with the skeletonizing and the backspacer and all of the nice details on the hardware. I don't know, but whatever it was, that mix, when it all came together, made for a knife that to me is just extremely attractive. And again, one that I was really excited to pick up, and so I immediately did the second I could. And so now it's here, and I want to talk about it and go over all the details and talk about who it's for. And details is really the main word, the main focus of this entire video. Saiboo actually means details in Japanese, I'm told, and that's really what is going to give this knife value, is all of those extra little details that you won't see on a lot of other production knives. When you look at the fact that it's 20 CV steel and G10, there are cheaper knives than the $212 that you're going to shell out for this. Cheaper knives with the same materials, but if you are someone who appreciates the extra levels and the extra steps that Benchmade has taken on this model, then this probably will be the one for you. So we'll hash all that out. We'll talk about some competitive options and some other good recommendations if this is not necessarily your thing. But let's just get into it. And what I'm going to try to start doing, guys, is listing the specs for the knives on the left side here. Something that I've just gotten into in terms of editing, video editing, but sometimes I do leave some stuff out, and so I want to make sure I don't miss anything, so you can always catch it at the beginning of the video, hopefully from this point forward. All right, but talking about the cutting edge and the blade and then size comparisons, what we have is a 2.75 inch cutting edge, from where that sharpening choil starts all the way to the tip, and that's really comparable to a lot of other knives that you're going to compare this knife to. The first one that I think of if you're thinking about a gents piece is the Benchmade proper. So here's a size comparison there. There we go. And then here is the Kershaw dividend. A little bit different, but you can get a good look there. And then one comparison that I really wanted to make was the Ontario Rat Model 2, because the first thing I thought of when I saw the blade shape on this Saiboo was the Rat 2. And yeah, just very similar, classic drop point, flat grind on both of those. And then finally, the best competitive option, which we'll get to later, is the Benchmade 555 or 556 for that matter, -1. 20 CV steel, also G10, and a pretty comparable blade length. All right, but continuing to talk about the blade, like I said, we have a flat grind, and it's in 20 CV, which for me, in my experience, has been beyond excellent every single time I've had it. I've had it in a few different knives now, and it is just extremely super sharp, and it keeps that super sharpness for a long time. When you're talking about knives dulling, sometimes they'll dull to a certain point and then keep that usable edge, but this one, it stays screaming sharp for a pretty darn good long time, and a lot of people compare 20 CV to M390, and I don't know, a lot of different steels get compared to M390 and say, oh, it's just like that, but from a different company. Whatever. All I can say is that 20 CV is really good, and for my money, there aren't very many production knife kind of steels that I see that I like any better than this. You also could see that this is a first production, so yeah, sort of lucked out with that. That's pretty cool. But the blade is just a classic look. A nice refined point in order to pierce and start a cut. We do have, like I said, a little bit of a sharpening choil for ease of maintenance there. No jimping, but a slight little ramp here, and then a depression for choking up, and we'll talk about that a little bit more when it comes to ergos. One thing that I always try to mention every time I talk about a Benchmade knife is just their stonewash. And maybe it's because I'm a Benchmade guy, and you can accuse me of that as much as you like, but they have just the nicest, most subtle stonewash on their knives, that it looks like satin from a distance, and then when you see it up close, it just has all the little detail of the stonewash. And with the glare, I'm probably not going to be able to get it in focus, but yeah, it just is a really classy look that you see on a lot of their knives. All right, and then one of the big details that we have on the blade is the thumb studs. The thumb studs have this cocobolo insert that matches the cocobolo that's further back in the G10, and that's just a really nice extra touch. You know, it gives it that little flare of detail, little flare of that extra step in the process. The thumb studs are really comfortable to actuate, and one thing I was concerned with was maybe those cocobolo inserts might be a little fragile and might be like sticking out, so they might be able to pop out, and I don't think that's going to be the case at all. I think it's just really well done. So that's a nice detail. As we move on back, the G10 is this nice matte finish, so it's not slick at all, but you do get a little bit of traction here. Low traction, but again, it's very comfortable. We have a really, really cool backspacer here, guys. A different kind of backspacer. And for me, this is one of the things that just adds a lot of value because this has that reminiscent, like Japanese bamboo kind of feel and just sort of ties the whole knife together. You know, when you look at it from the side, yeah, sure, it looks good. But once you roll it over, I mean, that just adds so much to it, that design on the backspacer. So a big fan of that. And, you know, sometimes knives with backspacers, they're hard to maintain because they're not open frame. But, yeah, you have enough cutouts here that getting in there and cleaning this knife out will still be extremely simple. All right, so definitely a positive there. And then let's take a close-up look at the cocobolo inserts. Just probably one of the biggest selling points. And as you can see, they're not completely flush. It's slightly raised from the insert to the G10, and that's intentional. I mean, it's not seamless. It's not supposed to be seamless, but it's perfectly smooth and contoured nicely so that you have a point of contact here, but it's nothing sharp whatsoever. So so well done with that, and just well done just in general with all of the skeletonizing. You know, it just syncs up perfectly. Again, just another really nice detail. One more is the hardware. So we have you know, obviously the screw heads on this side, but they screw all the way into this this back part here that is all divoted, and you can see the body screws and the pivot all share that same design. So again, just another piece of consistency that adds to the overall look of the knife. My favorite thing though is this. Being able to just open and close and see the knife through the skeletonizing. Yeah, just going to show that just a little bit. So yeah, pretty cool feature there. We do have a lanyard hole, so that is definitely a plus if you're someone who likes lanyards. The clip we're using is the bug out clip in a satin version. Deep carry, and I really like that Benchmade continues to put the 3 holes for their clips, even though these new deep carry clips only use 2. So you could swap it out to one of the Benchmade classic clips or another custom clip if you so desire. So again, another nice touch that they continue to do that. I hope they don't stop doing that because that is an excellent extra step. Again. All right, so now let's talk about action and fit and finish. And I'm going to splice in a video of the action. You'll probably see it on the left side of me opening and closing the knife. And all I've got to say about the action is that it is beyond on point. You know, it's perfect. And what I've said a number of times with my recent Benchmade purchases is that the action and the lockup just continues to get better and better. It drops shut. You just saw that very easily, but the centering is pretty much excellent. And one of the things that I can tell you though is that with the more recent stuff like this knife, the 555-1, which I'll bring back out, the Freak, the Mini Freak, all of the Benchmades that I bought in the past couple years, they free drop after breaking in with almost no issue whatsoever, and they still lock up perfectly. I mean, zero side to side, 0 up and down. I mean, this is a vault. And it drops the way that you just saw it drop in that video. So, I mean, they have definitely taken some steps. I think increased washer size, whatever it is that they're doing. But, I mean, the things that I used to see with the Benchmades as far as like this mini grip, where, yeah, it centers pretty decently, but it's sort of off to the side. And it'll free drop, but with a little bit of side-to-side play. Like, that's not the case anymore. And I've seen consistently over about 6 knives now that they are doing this on a much better level than they were, say, 3 or 4 years ago. So kudos to them for the excellence of execution that we have there. All right. One other thing I wanted to touch on was getting back to the blade. I'm sorry, sort of skipping around, but getting back to the blade. Someone mentioned that the blade looked a little bit too small for the handle. When you look at this, and I can see that. I can see that. And when you talk about ergos, like when you have the knife in hand, you can see how high the cutting edge is versus how low my forefinger is. And that's just something that sort of harkens back to some more traditional knives. Nowadays we have a whole lot of folders that have these big, beefy kind of blades, and they fill the handle and then stick out some, and that's just sort of common. But that wasn't always the case with the traditional knives that, say, our parents grew up with. And so you would get maybe a pretty decent size handle, but then a more thin and streamlined blade. And this just sort of, like I said, looks to me to be more like a traditional kind of style, with obviously some present day kind of skeletonizing and stuff, and some nice extra details. But yeah, sort of, like I said, harkens back to the kinds of knives that maybe we would have seen more out of like slip joints or more traditional gents pieces. So that's sort of where I think that kind of blade size comes from. All right, now let's talk about the one, not even going to say negative, but the one area where the knife could be better, and that is definitely with ergonomics. Right, the ergos aren't bad on this knife, and for me, it just takes a little bit of adjusting, and they're quite good actually. But it is a little bit of a struggle, and I can, if I'm trying to look through someone else's perspective, especially someone with bigger hands, I can see how it would be very difficult. We have this little lip right here where my forefinger locks in, and then the slight ramp where, yeah, the knife feels pretty darn good in hand at this point, especially with all the different points of contact that you have down here between the G10 and the Cocobolo. So that's very good. If I'm choking up, I can slide down and it's comfortable like this. That's just fine for me. Also, for light detail work, though I wouldn't recommend it, you can, choke up and use this, but again, there's no guard at this point to keep you from sliding onto the blade. But anyone with larger hands might really struggle. Anyone with larger hands might not be able to make this knife work for them. And my hands being, like medium to smaller, take a look at my hand on the mini Griptilian if you need that for comparison. It works perfectly for me, but anyone with bigger hands, this might not be the knife for you. Now, that being said, if I'm Benchmade, I definitely come out with a 3.5-inch blade version of this knife. 100%. I think that would be a no-brainer, and it would make this knife extremely marketable to a whole lot more people. So hopefully that's something we see in the future. But again, if you have reservations or are very particular with how the knife is in hand, maybe stay away from this one. All right. Competitive options. Well, the best competitive option, if you are looking for just an EDC tool, a great knife, a great functional knife with excellent materials that are on par with these materials, then I think the best decision for you would be to go with the 555 or the 556-1. We have the same steel in 20 CV. We have excellent G10. Feels good in hand. When we're talking about the weight, which I know I listed in the specs earlier, but didn't really bring out the scale. When we're talking about the weight is comparable between these two knives, 2.7 ounces because of the cutouts and 2.86. So as far as a functional tool, you really can't do much better for 20 CV steel with this mini grip coming in at $165 versus the $212 that you're going to pay for the Saiboo. So again, if you just need a tool, a good functional knife, hey, I can't recommend anything better than the 555-1. That said, sometimes we look for different things. Sometimes we look for a little bit more. And I think for me, the Saiboo really delivers in other ways as well. Sure, it's a great EDC, but it's a great gents piece. And it's one of those conversation pieces as well that I don't think that there are very many production knives out there built to this quality that have this kind of look. So you do have a unique piece. You have something different and individual, and just a good example of Benchmade operating at a high level. So, while I think that if you just need to break down boxes for, 2 days straight with an excellent knife, the Griptilian is a good one to go with. There's a whole lot to be said for those extra steps that were taken in the Saiboo, and I definitely think that there's value at the $212 price point. So, yeah, definitely happy with this purchase. All right, guys, so that's really my take on it. Any questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, as always, let me know down below. What do you think? Which one would you choose between the two of these? And what would your purposes be for picking up the Saiboo? Do you appreciate the extra steps here, or do you just need something that's a useful tool? Love to hear from you guys all the time, so I'll talk with you soon, and hopefully I'll see you down below. Have a good one. Bye.